So my suggestion is that we start and we do maybe, let's say, a shorter meeting, and we go through the presentation, and then this becomes also a knowledge product, a video that can be a part of the learning materials for anyone interested in this topic. Because you saw that I sent already a reminder, this also right now. The links are functioning, the individual links are functioning, the ones that you have received, they know the time. So I don't know.
It might be the speakers.
Not the speakers. Maybe Putin. Stop.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I think your suggestion's fine, Eduardo. If we record and we go through it, then it's there for anybody to view. Yeah,
absolutely. That will be simply a learning video. Yeah, and then we can use it. For example, we can then also curate it and pack in smaller portions. And we can include it actually in the training module on Moodle. And we are also already organizing and designing, engineering the modules in Moodle. Of course, there will be a training as promised, but it's progressing. And I asked yesterday whether we could use these videos. He said, very easy. We place the videos wherever we want in the flow of the course. So this could be one. So then I give you the floor. Then Kelly, please take the lead. And consider that we are recording this as a learning material, let's say, a learning product.
Yeah, okay. I think that sounds good. You know, anyway, like you said, it's a good run through for us anyway. And those who are with us can certainly jump in and give us the feedback, hopefully, that we're looking for. So I'm just going to share my screen with the presentation, and we'll try this in presentation mode. If it doesn't work out and we can't, you know, like if it's not moving or whatever on your side, please let me know, because sometimes we had that trouble with PowerPoint. Has it come up?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. And did it move
Yes.
to the next slide? Okay. So the objectives of the meeting today are to go through the training module. So we discussed at the first community of practice session, which was pretty well attended, the guideline that had been developed or was currently at that point in development. And we took some of the feedback that we got from the partners of the community of practice on board. And then following that, the guideline has been not revised, but kind of added to in order to build out a training module. So we wanted to present some of the format, purpose, and contents of the training module. The training module itself takes more than 10 hours to complete. So obviously we can't do absolutely everything, but you know, at least we can go through what's in it. Then the second item is to really look at the types of exercises, readings, and so on that we've included in the training module. And we are hoping to get some feedback from our community of practice participants and others on the exercises that we've proposed, and suggestions should people have additional suggestions. The second main point that we will cover today is a proposed innovation and technology tool. Patrick will speak in more detail about the tool and the concept behind it and what we are trying to achieve with us. And what we would like to get from the community of practice today is some high-level feedback on whether the concept is good, essentially. So whether you all agree with the concept or you think we should tweak it, whether you think it will be useful, and so on and so forth, before we move forward into a formal prototyping stage. And then finally, last but not least, also on the agenda is a little bit from Eduarda on further areas and channels of engagement, which are coming up very soon. So that's what we are hoping to achieve today. And I would like to also formally welcome those who are with us. And I suspect that more people may join us as we go along. You never know. So welcome to everyone who's here. The agenda, we will spend the bulk of the time on the training module contents with a shorter session for the innovation module tool. We've put in a 10-minute stretch break in the middle because it's difficult to sit and stare at a computer so long. So we'll definitely do that as well. Okay, I think without further ado, maybe we can just quickly speak to who is in the room. So I think we're all familiar with each other. I don't see any new names, but just in case. My name is Kelly Shiohira, and I'm the Executive Manager for JET Education Services for the Research and Data Ecosystems Division. And I'm joined today by my colleague, Patrick. Everyone in the room is very familiar, but for those who may be joining us later or videos and so on, what we're presenting today is training module 9. So 9 deals with innovation and technology, and it is one of 10 ACQF training modules. We have several parts to the training module. The first 2 introduce general information, the purpose of the training module, what it's for. Part 3 provides more detail on the rationale for the guidelines, the benefits of innovation and technology, how innovation actually happens in some ways, risks and mitigation strategies, and then also focuses on a bit on databases and database types. And then following that, we focus on innovations and qualifications frameworks, exploring some topics and examples in detail. So today we will go through the different sections in brief. As I mentioned before, we can't cover everything, but we will try to make some examples and give you a sense of how it's designed. The training modules are designed for self-paced learning, facilitator-directed learning, or a combination of the above. So they're meant to be quite flexible, and they have been designed in a way that there can be group work or there can be individual work. So we'll go through that as well. The training modules themselves, as I mentioned, are elaborated from the technical guidelines. They go into a bit more depth than the technical guideline does, especially I think in this topic. So there are questions, there's debate. What we focus on a lot is trying to get people to reflect on their own contexts and think about how cases might be applicable or not applicable. And we include different types of exercises, including reflective questions, learning activities. We try to, as much as possible, delve into experiential learning to let people explore different, different innovations that are happening. Since the delivery is meant to be self-paced or online, we are a little bit in some ways limited to technology-based innovations, which I think is one limitation of the training modules. But as we go through, maybe there are some suggestions about that as well. The intended learning outcomes are that we would understand what databases are, the advantages and disadvantages of different types of databases. We introduce some key concepts, the innovation design process, ethical use of data, technologies implemented in the space. And we would like people to understand the key requirements for and components of credential pathways, reflect on their own country context, and understand the roles that innovations play in these. And understand how competency frameworks, digital assessments, digital credentials, recognition of prior learning can interact with different technologies within country contexts. So yes, that's, I think, the intended learning outcomes. At this point, I would like to hand over to my colleague, Patrick, who will take us through the first part of the module. Patrick, over to you.
Thank you, Kelly. Yes, so if you could just move to the next slide, thank you. So this is basically a section summary, just looking, under a few topics. The first one being, why innovate? Also looking into the risks of innovation, because most of the time when you're dealing with new things, there's always risks that are associated that you have to be cognizant of. And then we just look at the processes of innovation, and then just want to touch on databases as well. So why innovate would be the question. And I think in the context that we live in now, where technology is playing a big role in everything that we do, it has basically become part of every aspect of our lives. It's good to be proactive in terms of identifying new opportunities and taking those opportunities. One thing that technology has brought about is efficiencies in the processes of daily life. I think this is also important as well for when we think about, qualification systems, especially NQFs, that, you're looking for things that will make it easier, for countries to benefit from such systems. Because as we know, we are at different stages across the continent of, developing, implementing NQFs. And I think in the last few years, there has been some reviews of some, either regional qualification systems or some that are actually global. And one of the major questions that is being asked, or was being asked at that point, is what is the role of technology in taking those systems forward? And improved effectiveness as well would be something that you want to bring in, and technology is very useful in kind of assisting in that direction. And then of course, there's the reaction part, because the environment of technology is that things change so fast that sometimes you have to react to some of the things that have happened. And
yes,
we see that much in the labor market, where there's changing skills needs, new jobs that were not here before are popping up, and this trend will continue into the future. So organizations need to kind of react to that changing labor market, and then just the processing of information and the management of such information, can be assisted through innovation. And then the rest of innovations, it's usually at the top of mind. We think about cybersecurity. Once you take all the information that you have, put it online, there's always the risk that some organizations or individuals might try to get to that information, because in this current age, information is power. So we always have to think about that, but not just cybersecurity, also physical security that comes with using technology. Increasing inequality is one of the other things that I think, especially as the African continent, we know a lot about inequality. So these are some of the things that technology can bring, where some countries or regions are already far ahead in terms of ICT infrastructure or access to the internet, for example. And we need to manage this process carefully to make sure that we try to distribute access across the board, and bring those that are a bit far behind a bit closer to the rest. Data privacy is another thing that always pops up when you talk about new technologies, because in a space where to access some of these technologies, you have to willingly give up your data to these companies. But from that point on, a lot of people or organizations don't really have much control or even know what happens to the data. So I think even the idea of self-sovereign identity, where individuals actually have a final say of what happens to their data, is something that is becoming more and more important as we traverse this new environment. And then in terms of even the process of digitalization, where now processes and business models are changing, it brings up the question of skills. You need people to be a bit more digitally literate in order for them to work in this new environment. So upskilling and reskilling is something that becomes important. The innovation cycle, we'll cover this a bit more in another slide that's coming up. But yeah, we also have sample reflection questions, as part of at different points within the training manual, so that you can just reflect on what you've just read or studied or accessed through some of the links, and then this will help you, that repetition, and for you to help you integrate some of the information into your own thinking. And yeah, I will skip this one. I think Kelly will do maybe one later. So I'd like to move to the next slide, please. All right. So earlier when I mentioned that double diamond diagram for design cycle processes, this diagram here on the right, is just another representation of the design process. And as you can see here, you almost have 3 parts to it. The top part, which is the ideation phase. I guess this is so again you identify the problem, pinpoint what it is exactly through research, and then you come up with a solution. This is now when you skip to the second part, specification. Now you try to identify what the solution could be. And then once you go through that process, you design a prototype and try to see if it actually is relevant within context. And one of the things, maybe if you look at the right side of the diagram, one of the main features of this one is that at every stage, there's iteration, where you repeat the process until you're sure that you have identified the correct thing or you've come up with the right solution for this particular problem. But now I would like us to maybe jump into an activity by way of being practical about what you can expect from the training manual. So what I want you to do is consider this diagram here on this page, and then the other one, which is the double diamond diagram, and then reflect on how are these two models similar, how are they different, and which do you prefer and why. So I don't know if Kelly, you would go back to that other double diamond, just so that they can see what it is again and reflect on both of them. So maybe you can, write something in the chat as well, if you'd like to, and then we'll maybe look at some of those a bit later. If you look at this as well, it's just the cycle itself. There's a few steps of what you need to do when you're in that design cycle. Just a different representation in terms of visuals, but you might find that there's some similarities there, but obviously there's possibly differences that you might notice as well. And of course, try to figure out which one you prefer best between the two of them. How long should we give them, Kelly?
I think there are very few people with us, Patrick, but you do have some comments from Eduarda in the chat and from me, actually. So yes, I think it will be difficult for us to do practical activities when it's really just our team and one participant. But yeah, maybe we could get some short feedback from Eduarda.
Okay.
I was just saying that we have 2 participants from Tunisia, from the TVET department, the head of department, and Madame Olfa, who is a project manager. But in my view, the double diamond is more kind of straightforward and easier to grasp, understand. And simplicity has many beauties, I would say. And if we want to adopt innovation, maybe a simpler view can help overcome resistance, because innovation is always linked with a bit of change, obviously, quite a lot, and people are resistant to change. Very often institutions are resistant to change. So adopting an approach or a visual design that is appealing and easier to communicate also can be very useful.
Thanks,
Okay,
Eduarda. Patrick, James. Yeah.
Just a quick maybe question, Patrick and Kelly. So, you know, theory of change gets used so often nowadays to do planning, even for innovation. So why is this different? Why don't you use a theory of change? I mean, I think it's a question that most people will ask.
I think I'll take that if you don't mind, Patrick. Theories of change being one of my things. James, so a theory of change is something that you would develop once you have a plan. So once you have an innovation that you're trying to implement, and then you're taking it forward into like an M&E framework, for example, then you might elaborate a theory of change as to how you expect it to work and the outcomes that you expect to have. And while there's some overlap in these processes, the double diamond kind of design and the other framework that Patrick also presented are both about the process of innovation itself. So how do you identify a solution to a problem? How do you prototype and test it? So you would really only start thinking, I believe, about a theory of change in the deliver phase. So at the end of this double diamond, then you might think about how you might take this forward into an M&E framework.
Yes, thank you, Kelly. And I guess even to Eduardo's point, you know, like you said, simplicity sometimes is, you know, one of the best things that you can have. And I guess it even depends in your own thought process, you know, whether it's an organization or an individual. You know, because the second diagram has a bit more detail. You know, some people will find that they are more detail oriented, and then they would like to see, you know, some of those different smaller elements of what it takes, you know, to get from the first design question and then getting to the solution itself. So I think either one is, you know, bad or good. It just depends on, you know, how an organization or an individual kind of thinks around these things.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe just one more question while we've got lots of time to ask questions. Are countries reliant on consultants to develop these kind of models, or can they do it themselves?
Can I ask, you mean develop or apply the models?
Good question, Eduardo. I suppose more apply. Yeah, okay. Apply. Mm.
We don't actually have that much time. We have another 30 slides, James, just for the record. So I think on that note, Patrick, if it's all right, I'll take us forward into the next section. So this deals with a little bit more. From this section on, we'll deal a little bit more with the concrete details of the different innovations that we have identified. Something that I would also like to bring up at this point is the fact that it was really difficult in the research decouple innovations and technology.
Technology.
So they're often conflated. You know, when you look at innovation readiness, 90% of it is about, okay, but do you have, you know, internet? And like, are you ready? Do you have computers? Are you networked? Like these types of questions, which are very explicitly linked to technology. But in our view, innovations aren't reliant on technology. I don't know if you've seen the little YouTube clip about, it's a guy sorting oranges, hey, like he's a farm worker, and he's kind of just set up these two poles at just a little bit of an angle so that the large oranges drop first, and then the medium oranges drop in the medium box, and the small oranges drop in the small box. And this is in itself, you know, a type of innovation and an example of a non-technology. I mean, you could argue, I suppose, that sticks are technology in a way, but a non-internet based innovation that solves a problem that this person had in their everyday life. So we have made an effort to decouple them, but as I mentioned, a lot of our examples are technology based just because of the platforms that we have to use for the training. So all right, so the first section deals with kind of innovations in qualifications themselves, so like how they are structured. We cover qualifications passports, which are a new, there's a European version and then also a UNESCO version, which is based on the European qualifications passport for refugees. And these seek to solve, you know, one of the challenges that is faced around the world today, which is migration and a loss of credentials or a loss of qualifications as a result of that. So we cover those a bit. We cover flexible credential pathways in some detail. And some of the contributors to flexible credential pathways are the idea that we can now aggregate learning in new and more efficient ways and bring in new types of learning like MOOCs and digital badges and so on and so forth. Into kind of the formalized system in new and innovative ways. So some examples are stackable credentials, which allow people to transition in and out of the labor market multiple times without necessarily losing the gains that they've made. We talk quite a bit about credential kind of pathways of articulation, if you could put it that way, and kind of the new ideas of how you can bring in also maybe non-formal and informal learning in a bit more structured ways. So we also cover personalized learning and the role that personalized learning is now playing both in qualifications frameworks and then also in individual learning. And finally, we look at self-assessment, which is kind of like assessment while doing, if you want to put it that way. So people are just busy playing a game, or they're on their course, or they're doing whatever they are doing. And all of the time in the background, there's information being collected about capacities. And this is very closely linked to personalized learning, which is why we've put them together. For each section, we also engage and present some recommended reading. Wherever possible, there's one exception to this, but wherever possible, we have limited ourselves to non-paywall articles, which are available online so that people can reference all of them. So yes, the exception is actually on this page. It's the 2013 publication of Stealth Assessment by the MIT Press. That is a book which is paid for, but it's kind of the definitive stealth assessment work, if I could put it that way. So we felt we had to include it. Just an example or a case study that we provide in this section is on Singapore. And this is dealing maybe a little bit more basically with articulation pathways and how actually in practice a flexible credential pathway or a flexible qualification pathway might look. And in the Singapore case, there's some conversation. Some of our questions are, you know, is this a good system or not? Like, what lessons can you learn from Singapore? And there are debates around this. So, but the way the system basically works is that there are 6 years of compulsory primary school, followed by a leaving examination. And this leaving examination is not the only, but it is one of the critical factors which determines the type of secondary education that students will go into. So this is a very early tracking system, if I could put it that way. Some will go into the general certificate. So some will go into express streams, normal streams, or technical streams, normal technical colleges. And these secondary education experiences do cover basically the same curriculum, but they are already geared towards technical and vocational education, or, you know, academic university further education. But at the same time, you can see from the diagram that, you know, beyond that point, anyone can end up anywhere. It's just a matter of how long and what route it might take them. So you could start off in a secondary technical track and end up with a doctoral degree at a university. You just would go through maybe a different pathway to get there. So the points of interest in this diagram are the early tracking of students, the high degrees of articulation between systems, and their use of compulsory and high stakes assessment. So these are things that participants can discuss at some length, probably write books about, to be quite honest, whether they're good or bad or would work in their context or not. But it's presented exactly to prompt those sorts of discussions. So what are the key lessons that you would learn from the Singapore experience? What barriers to a flexible learning pathway are likely to be encountered in your specific context? So in a group setting, these can be discussed among the participants. In an individual setting, these could be, you know, short answer responses or things like that, depending on the format of training. Let me just check the chat here. Oh, it's in French. Sorry, this is, I must hand over to Patrick.
Yes.
Or Eduarda.
Shall I read? Yeah, is it okay?
Yeah, please.
So Mr. Mustafa Hassan, who is the head of TVET department in Ministry of Labor and Vocational Education and Training, Tunisia, says, we fully agree with we fully share the idea that innovation is not always related to technology, and it is possible to evolve in the techniques of recognition of prior learning or recognition of competences to develop competence, and also to develop mutual recognition of qualifications between different countries, and for development of career progression, and also evolve on the technological front, let's say, from the technology point of view. So he's basically mentioning various areas where innovation and technology are important from the point of view, for example, of TVET and qualifications frameworks.
Yeah, I fully agree.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we're all aligned, which is great.
Yeah. So TVET department Tunisia is actually coordinating the work of the NQF. Yeah, of the Tunisia NQF.
Great.
Monsieur Hassan, si vous voulez parler, allez-y. Vous pouvez.
If you want to take the floor, please feel free. We have interpretation available.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you. Okay. Yeah, so these are just some of the reflection questions that we cover also in the training. So there's a short video that UNESCO has put together, which is testimonials from participants in Zambia who have received qualifications passports. And so the suggestion is to watch that video and then undertake a bit of discussion on it to see the advantages and limitations or challenges that are outlined. And then we also kind of speak to some of the things which are explicitly written out into the training module about the enabling factors, the Singapore experience, and barriers. So I think a lot of this also was presented on the previous slide. So that is basically what we talk about in that first section. The next section, the next section talks a little bit to innovation in comparing and analyzing qualifications. This is actually the most emerging space, if I could put it that way. So the key point here is that all of these ideas, the credential fluency, the automation, and the use of artificial intelligence are in most contexts still exploratory, not all, but in most. So we talk a little bit about credential fluency. So this is kind of the idea, as I mentioned before, that informal and non-formal learning can also form part of a skills portfolio or a skills profile of an individual, in addition to kind of the formal qualifications. And the keys to achieving that would be the user-centered approach, digital forms of recognition, improved data interoperability, which I'll talk a bit more about later, and closer alignment between learning and work. What we also speak to in terms of comparing and analyzing qualifications is partial automation or full automation and the use of artificial intelligence. And the biggest example is actually the semi-automated processes currently being piloted by the ACQF. So we link to that a bit. But we also speak a lot to the potential of this area. It hasn't been fully developed yet, but I think a lot of people are currently exploring, and a lot of different organizations are exploring how these new technologies can influence taxonomy mapping, credit transfer, skills matching, qualifications comparison, and verifications processes. Later in the training session, we do speak quite a bit about how artificial intelligence is being used in skills matching, but not exactly in this section, which deals with the comparison, specifically the comparison of qualifications. Yes, Eduarda, would you like to come in?
No.
Oh, okay, sorry.
No, I was just nodding, yes.
Oh, yes, okay. So then we go on to registration and management of qualifications. And this one deals with two main topics, interoperability and credit banks. We provide some recommended reading. And yeah, these are quite long. Some of these are quite long recommended readings, but we've pulled out some pages that you could consider. And I wanted to speak a little bit around interoperability in this section, because I think this is it's not so much an emerging concept anymore. It's a developed concept, but not familiar to absolutely everybody yet. So basically the ideas of interoperability deal with information exchange. And in the module, I elaborate on something I've used before in some other workshops, which is a comparison between interoperability and the system of writing. So you have all these different levels of interoperability, some of which deal with standardization and some of which deal with kind of organizational, human, and social processes. But when we look at just the standardization part, there's quite a close analogy actually to writing, which is one of the oldest innovations of mankind, actually. When we talk about the technical infrastructure, nowadays we're talking about the clouds and the servers and the ledgers. But if you think about writing, this is your pencil, your pen, your paper, and the postal system that exchanges those letters, And then when we talk about data standardization, now we are looking at actually data standards, which are kind of the language, if you want to put it that way, the language that your computer and your phone might speak. And if they speak the same language, they can exchange information. And if they don't, then you can't. This is much like me and our French speakers. My French is extremely limited. So I had to ask Eduarda to step in as an intermediary for us and explain the comment in French. So again, just like writing, if I write in Japanese, you won't understand me unless you speak Japanese. And if you write in French, I won't understand you unless I speak French. And then the next level starts to deal a bit with semantics, the formats, the labels, the terminologies used. And this is very much like the grammar layer, if you want to put it that way. If I start using question marks where I should have periods, or I start inserting commas randomly everywhere, my writing suddenly becomes more difficult to understand, and computers work in a similar way. So yeah, so that's a little bit on interoperability. And then the example that we provide is the CEDAFOP skills and labor market dashboards, which are very much based on the interoperability of different databases. They draw data from a lot of different sources and show some of the things that can be achieved through achieving interoperability. So we provide participants both time and links to explore so that they can just see some of the outputs of interoperability in the context of skills and qualifications frameworks. James has linked something in the chat, but I can't click on it because it will take me out of the PowerPoint. So everyone is welcome to explore what he has linked, and I will look at it later. Then we ask for just some quick reflection sessions after going through these different types of exercises or looking at these examples, to just think a little bit about the benefits of interoperable data ecosystems and how it might assist people in their own specific country contexts. we also in this section, as I mentioned, talk about credit banks. And the example we give is the Shanghai Open University's credit transfer and accumulation bank for lifelong education. This is just one of many, many examples worldwide. So if there are others that people feel should be highlighted, I'm happy to also consider those or make some adjustments if necessary. But I think the point of this was to address the needs of internal migrants and a growing elderly population. It focuses on lifelong learning, and it deals with the aggregation and exchange of credits. So citizens can achieve or obtain credits from different institutions, open universities, which are, MOOCs or anywhere really, and they can add these into their credit account, if you want to put it that way. And then if they aggregate enough credits, they can be exchanged for qualifications. And there's some couple hundred that have successfully been achieved. So we go through that example a bit. And then also the lessons learned from this example. So higher education institutions were reluctant actually to participate in required incentivization from the government, which in China is quite strong. Their incentives are do it or stop operating. So, and then they needed to develop an explicit policy for the accumulation of different types of credits. And then there was also dealing back with the interoperability and the language choice. If credit doesn't have the same definition, or there's conflation between time and credit in some places, but not others, this led to some complications between understanding how things could be aggregated and exchanged. So that's the example that we give for that. Moving on, we talk to credentials and the recognition of learning, which is by far the most elaborate section. We talk about the recognition of prior learning itself, but not in great detail because it's actually covered in another training module in module 10. So we just briefly introduce it and speak about some innovations in that space and provide some readings. But we speak a bit more about digital credentials, competency-based assessment, and digital and virtual assessments. Micro-credentials are also covered in module 10. So we cover those, but again, not in too much detail, just to avoid too much repetition in the training modules. But there's a lot of different readings for this section that people can go into a lot of detail if they want to.
Can I ask?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, thanks a lot, Kelly. I think one thing that maybe could be added, although I know it is part of the, but I mean added in the slides, yes, is because it's in any case in the training module, are the links to the different tools related, for example, with digital credentials or digital assessment. So the different tools, so that people can just go in, check, and even do the assessment.
Yeah.
They are mentioned in the training module. Nothing special.
Okay. Yeah. So this is one of them. But yeah, I'll try to add those in. I think we ran out of space, so maybe I'll have to split it into 2 slides. But I'll look at how to do that. One of the activities that we present in the module is this one. So it's a test your digital skills online digital assessment that anyone can access. So we recommend that participants do, as part of the training, take the digital skills assessment, explore their own results and their individual learning maps, just to kind of get a sense of how this could work. A digital assessment online can work. And then there are some reflective questions that we suggest about, what do people learn about themselves? What do they like? What do they not like so much? And if they were going to create a virtual assessment, what skills would they recommend be tested? So it could be digital skills like this one, but it could be others as well. Okay. And then we also provide a second activity which deals with different types of platforms that exist where you could you could use them to create a virtual assessment. So we suggest 3 that people should explore. Google Forms is quite easy. We use it a lot at JET. Mentimeter is another platform which has a free version that people can look at. And then we recommend exploring iSpring Suite. So they all have different strengths and weaknesses. So as part of the training module, we suggest that we go through the 3, individuals or in groups, go through the 3, and then discuss the one they like the best, the strengths and weaknesses that they see in these different platforms, and some advantages and disadvantages to digital assessment over traditional assessment. So that's another activity that we suggest. Sorry, I'm trying to also, yeah, Patrick has put in the link for the test your digital skills activities. So if people would like to explore that later, they can. Oh, sorry, it went backwards instead of going forwards, I think. Sorry. Or there's a copy. Sorry, that slide doesn't belong there. Yeesh. I'm glad we're doing this run through.
Yeah, you see.
Yeah, so the next section deals with data collection and use. And there are some really interesting things happening in this space. And this is where innovations and technology kind of intersect a little bit with M&E and some of the other things. So we cover scraping, crowdsourcing, learning analytics, AI enhanced personalized learning, which is a little bit covered before, but not so much. And then from the M&E side, looking at micronarratives, data exhaust, and data visualization. So there's some examples given in the slides here, and then also in the training module, of course, of how scraping is used and the types of things that it's been used for. And then how crowdsourcing has been used. And it's really interesting. I think crowdsourcing is very interesting personally. And I think it's worth spending some time thinking about how it could be applied to skills processes and to qualifications themselves. Yeah, and so Ukraine also used micronarratives. Micronarratives are quite an interesting form of monitoring and evaluation that we also cover. These are sort of participants, like how you can get a large number of participant perceptions and responses on a specific topic using technology, of course, and then analyze it. So it's a specific methodology. And it's particularly good, actually, at investigating government service reception. So, you know, some of these types of M&E frameworks around government policies always include items as to how it's being perceived or how it's being used within the population. Well, micronarratives is a great approach to gather that sort of information. So we cover it just briefly. And then when we talk about data exhaust, these are sort of the data products of everyday activities. And as Patrick mentioned earlier, huge amounts of data exhaust are gathered up by companies like Facebook, like Google, like you know, all of TikTok, you know, all of these types of social media platforms are gathering up this sort of information all the time. But it could also be used for public good, you know. We could start thinking about how these things could be collected through our interactions with citizens. And then the last thing is data visualization, which is also quite important, and we look at in some more detail. So we suggest the activity of becoming a lifelong learner. We direct people to the Open University, and their really wide range of free courses. There's health, sports, psychology, education, development. And as you go down, there's probably a dozen different areas with hundreds and hundreds of different courses. And we suggest people, you know, try to sign up for one and experience this kind of MOOC environment for themselves, if they are not experiencing it through the training module itself, of course. But, you know, there's a lot of different topics there that people could explore. There's things on personal finance, there's things, you know, different sports and things like that. And then if people don't want to choose for themselves, learning how to learn is our recommendation. So you can, I actually wanted to find one on learning management systems, but they were all behind paywalls, which was unfortunate. But yeah. So this was kind of, this is presented as an example of a learning management system. as well as, something to introduce people to this type of online credential and digital badge kind of formats. Then we also suggest in this section this activity, which is linked to Tunisia. So this deals with the kind of collection of big data or the use of big data for labor market intelligence. And there are a lot of different charts and graphs and data visualizations that you can look at. But this is an example that kind of consolidates interoperability, the use of AI, and of course, labor market information in a new way. So we direct people to specifically the Green Skills dashboard, and we ask them to then explore the different dashboards that are given at this site and answer some basic questions just to, see how easy it is to use the visualizations to get some information. Yeah, so we have that activity as well.
Can I say what?
Definitely, please. That's why we're here.
Yeah, so just to say that this project continues now in 2022 to 2024, and we are going to include more countries from North Africa, notably Egypt, and probably, if everything goes well, maybe also Kenya. But Tunisia now has a very good amount of data because the data collection started in April 2020. And so Tunisia will be one of the strongest data systems and visualization. Also, the visualization platform is going to change. So let's say a new generation with also tailored also to different types of users, research, for example, or then more the end users, policy makers, etc.
Yeah. Well, that's a great example of, how the innovation cycle works, right? So you have a product that's been developed, a problem that was identified, and the solution was developed to solve it. And now it's being refined further based on feedback from users. So I think that's a really good example, actually. Maybe we should work in that whole process into the training module in some way. That would be cool. Okay, so the last section dealing with this sort of thing is innovations and communications. And we just cover social media here. Now, there are many, many, many innovations in communication that we could talk to, but we tried to narrow it down for length and also for relevance to qualifications frameworks. And so we just introduced social media briefly because it intersects with some of the other solutions that we've suggested, like micronarratives, for example. Yeah. And so it can be used to raise critical awareness. It can be used to elicit information. There are a lot of different ways or applications. And the reading that we suggest is social media use by governments, the policy primer. So people can look at that in a bit more detail if they choose to.
Can I ask
yeah, of course.
I think this idea of micro-narratives, which I don't master, I don't know, I need to learn, is really quite interesting. I can imagine, for example, this being now applied, for example, in the context of the current turbulence and crisis in Ukraine, where wide macro data, of course, on all these changes. Imagine all the IDPs, internally displaced people, companies moving in some way from east to west, etc. This could be very interesting as a sort of presentation of the issues and information data that cannot be based on macro data, on perfect statistical data, because it's impossible not to collect statistical data in that manner, and could be a way. I was just trying to figure out how this can be applied in the context of a crisis, for example. Innovation. So because we are in a period of an era of crisis, isn't it? It's permanent. There is always a new one, and
No, it's true, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, GIS data might be another interesting thing in terms of migration, but yeah, we focused on the ones we thought would feed the most directly into qualifications frameworks and regional qualifications frameworks, but there are many others as well that could be useful.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eduarda. We deal with two assessment tasks. So the first is essentially a written response. We suggest that participants choose and read one case study. And these case studies are 12 to 15 pages. They're not too long. And then we ask for a written reflection of 1,000 to 1,500 words, focused on, 5 main areas. So approaches and challenges in the articulation, funding strategies, assessment strategies, RPL, accumulation and transfer of credentials are the 5 areas that we suggest they focus on. And then we also ask them to reflect on learnings from that case study that could be applied to their own country context. And the evaluation, we suggest, as it would be really onerous for the evaluation to be done by one person or a single teacher or facilitator, we suggest that actually the evaluation is undertaken by other participants. So each participant would evaluate 2 other persons' writings using a rubric with criteria of clarity, relevance, and logical coherence. So that's the first assessment task. The second is a project and presentation. Sorry. So we suggest that they present for 10 to 20 minutes using collaborative software. I know James is not big on presentations and PowerPoints, but we are in this module. And so we asked them to essentially design and develop a flexible credential pathway for their country. So what the features would be, what they would include in the design, what innovations they think they would employ, the challenges they would be likely to face and how those could be overcome, and which stakeholders would be involved and have to contribute. We recognize that some may already have flexible credential pathways, so we suggest they then describe the design features, successes, and challenges, and how they would improve their existing system if they could. And then we also ask them to create a digital assessment on the presentation for the audience. So they'll quiz the audience using one of the software tools that we've introduced in the course. Just 3 questions, they don't have to be difficult. And then similarly, evaluation can be undertaken by the observers, and we provide a rubric for that. So that pretty much rounds out the training module. Let me pause for some comments, if there are any.
Maybe some of our participants could just share some views briefly. We have Diodon from Cameroon, and also Mr. Hassan and Madame Olfa, if they have any views about the training module or about what was presented from the training module. I personally find this training module really very, very rich, and we can read it and use it and learn from it for a long time, because it's so full of those micro examples, micro narratives in a way that you can really divide it in a learning path, a process with all those elements, and dig in, dive in. Yeah. Thank you for the work done, Kelly and Patrick.
We appreciate all the guidance we have received. So we are here just maybe hoping for more. If maybe Diodon has something to add, or yeah, any of our participants.
Kelly, good morning again, or hello.
Hello.
Yes, I listened keenly on the presentation and also the training module. I think maybe for the moment I don't have so much to add, but the training module, I think from what I've seen, I went through it is so, I think all the different points came out. And then during the presentation, what also inspired me is the different platform to facilitate the assessment, because we also need sharing, we need interactive, we need to communicate, and it's something so also important, because we need to share, to exchange, and it's always through those platforms that maybe you learn, you try to see what other people came out with, and I think that's what I appreciated. But for the moment, and then maybe I will come in again later on. Thank you. Hello, Eduarda.
Hi, bonjour, ça va bien?
Oui, ça va, Eduarda. Ça va.
Ravi de te voir.
Pareillement.
Thanks. Mercy has also joined us now. Okay, if there are no further comments, look, we can always also take comments. One of the good things about this training module is that it is also a bit of an innovation. So we can take feedback from those who read it or use it, and we can continue to grow and learn also and revise as necessary. So if there are no further comments, I will hand over to Patrick to speak a little bit about the innovation module tool and prototype. So this is the second major deliverable that we have been a little bit busy with over the last couple of months.
All right, thank you, Kelly. I guess we're skipping the stretch break.
You're right, I absolutely forgot about it. Should we take a short break, everyone? Eduarda, what do you think?
For me, it's okay if you consider it's indispensable. Maybe we can ask participants, Diodon and Monsieur Hassan, Madame Olfa, voulez-vous prendre une petite pause ou bien on peut continuer? And also Mercy, if you think it's important to take a break now, or we can go on.
Kelly, is it a coffee break?
Yeah.
Yeah, just very short.
5 minutes or 3 minutes.
Oh, it's okay for me, but it should be just a short break, and then we take it in.
Yes, yes, just 3 minutes, 5 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, I think let's shoot for let's try to come back then. I'm sorry, I can't even see the computer on my clock. Patrick, would you like to give us a time to be back?
Yeah, on my side is 12:18. I would assume it's 10:18 GMT. So maybe, I don't know, we can make it 25 past, or is it too long?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. See you in a few minutes.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. We stay, of course, in online. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you, James. We'll miss you in the rest of the session.
Hi, James. Thanks a lot. Patrick, did you already register for the training?
And which training?
The one, the training on 18th, 22nd April. I'm not so sure if I saw your name in the list.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll try to register. I think I was waiting to ask Kelly about it, whether we need to attend as well, or is it for selected people? But I'll double check.
If you are part of the trainers team, I don't know exactly if you are going to share with Kelly the time, the session, then you should register, because you get an individual link.
Oh,
then
okay.
I will send you this invitation. I will do it right now.
Oh, okay. No.
And please, could you register today? Because we had already closed it, but there were some people writing and writing, they want to participate, and I reopened only for 1 day.
Oh, okay. I know.
Yeah.
I'll definitely do that. Yeah.
Yes, I'll send you now this invitation with the link.
All right. I'll check it now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ah, il fallait même... Oui, ça va.
C'est parce que je me suis dit que ton langue peut nous sauver pour faire
Ok.
l'économie de ton langue blanche de qui a dit.
Oh yeah, hi there, Dora. So I just looked at the invitation and I was looking at the date. So I will be on leave actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Then Kelly, we'll do it with the small baby sitting on her lap. Yes.
Yes, that's exactly what will probably happen. Although by then I should have my office, so I can maybe lock the door.
Oh, and he is not going. Okay, outside of the home, you mean?
No,
Because if
inside
it's in the home,
but
you will go there. Oh.
it has a door that locks and there's a baby gate. It's upstairs, so maybe, fingers crossed, there will be no baby on my lap. But yes, no, I will do it. I'll be there,
Yeah.
obviously. Okay, are we back?
And we will have a nice presentation on micro-credentials from Micro-Credential Observatory. I sent you that information.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. It's good also. It'll give my voice a break.
Yeah, we have three guest speakers. Actually, now we have more than three, but well, that one is, I think, quite a nice one. And then we have Credential Engine.
Oh, yeah, of course.
They have 45 minutes and they are really amazing, as you know. And the CEO himself is coming.
Wow. Oh, that's great news.
Yeah.
Well done, Eduarda.
I was so happy
like I said, everyone knows you.
No, I was really happy because I simply wrote an email to Info Credential Engine. Then I was wondering, oh, maybe they will never read this, etc. But you know, so quickly, in the day, 2 days after, they replied, positive, yes, so interested. Then we had a meeting, and they are so kind of inspired people. Really, I was really so happy with that conversation. And he is coming. He is one of the speakers himself, the CEO.
Wow. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the training. I've booked off the whole week, so I will be there the whole time. That's my plan. Sometimes with baby on my lap, but I'll be there.
Baby on the lap is good. It's innovation.
You can also learn.
Yes. It's lifelong learning of all generations in the household. Baby and mom learning the same thing. It's amazing.
Yep, his first word will be credential.
Yes.
Okay, maybe we should restart.
You know, yep, we can continue.
Yep. So, okay, Patrick, over to you.
Thank you, Kelly. Can I present on my side the Word document version?
You want to share the screen yourself?
Yeah. Let me. I'm not sure how to stop sharing. Let me find that. There we go. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. So yeah, let me just do the standard thing and check if you can see the document.
Yeah, we can see. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Yes. So here we just are gonna share the tool on innovation readiness. And as Kelly had mentioned earlier, you know, this is really just a version where we would really appreciate some feedback. I think it was shared with everyone. So, you know, more than welcome to email comments to Kelly. You'll find her email address on the document itself. And just, you know, after this presentation, just go over it again and, you know, give us your input. That would be much appreciated. So this is in two parts, where firstly, I'm just going to talk about what this, innovation readiness tool is. And then towards the end, I'll just go into some of the, questions that you might ask yourself, as a form of self-assessment to see if you're innovation ready. That also is divided into two parts, two sections, and I'll get to those, as we move along the document. So firstly, like I said, it's just about talking about what this, tool is and why this tool. And as Kelly said, it is an innovation, itself. So it's an interesting, I guess, development as part of the training module and the guideline, overall. So while, there are, so one thing that we thought about was that there are a number of innovation readiness tools, that exist out there. But one thing we've come to see is that none of them are really, government driven, especially as it relates to qualifications and credentials. And most of them, are more focused on technology related innovations. So this one, focuses on both, both, the innovations that are not technology related, but we also try to cover, the ones that are most common, which are the ones, that are technologically related. And then another thing that, I guess we came to a conclusion of is that, the government is rarely seen or positioned as an innovator itself. Usually that's left, or the thinking is left to that, it's organizations or technology companies that are really innovators, within the areas of, work and education. But in this case, like during the COVID-19 pandemic, I mean, I guess because we're still in the pandemic, government had really had to, think innovatively in how to deal, with some of the negative aspects or impacts that resulted from lockdowns and, people being out of school for weeks or months on end, but having to come up with ways to make sure that, they mitigate against the negative impact of, children missing many hours of schooling. And then, like the establishment of qualifications systems and their maintenance is one area where governments really have an opportunity to innovate as well. In addition to responding to such innovations such as MOOCs, these are massive open online courses and international qualifications, as well as industry badges. So the instrument itself, it's designed to serve as an innovation readiness self-assessment. And this is specifically linked to innovations related to NQFs and RQFs. In examples of such innovations within this space would be, the revision of NQFs and RQFs. As I mentioned earlier, in the last few years, a number of RQFs, even those that are a bit more global, have been going through review. And one of the major aspects was, what role does technology play in moving these systems forward? Innovations to accommodate the new forms of learning and improve articulation. Sterilization processes, where now we're moving more and more towards working, online using technologies. That has changed the business model of many industries. So this is one of the considerations. The incorporation of new forms of data and learning to NQFs, enhancing efficiencies and accuracy of the evaluation of foreign qualifications, because that's been one of the major advantages of having NQFs, where now you have, I guess, comparable systems where you can manage that process of comparing qualifications from different countries or even different regions. Changes to credential management and storage. Also, we did mention, databases earlier, as a form of storing data. Innovations in the recognition of non-formal and informal learning, including the integration of the recognition of prior learning, that's RPL. And, this is important where we enter into a space where lifelong learning becomes an imperative for everybody to engage in. And then, the tool itself is meant to serve as a general indication of innovation readiness. And like I said, our definition is not merely limited to technology-based or network innovations. It is our considered opinion that all governments are innovation ready. So this tool is intended for government agencies to collaborate, and reflect on whether the required systems, structures, supports are in place for innovation to be developed widely and integrated into national qualification systems. And then this tool is designed to provide actionable insights to support innovations and their deployment at the national level. So, like I said, so the tool itself, has a series of questions with different options of how to answer those questions. So it does function as a checklist with recommended support for innovation development and adoption that can be actioned by any government. And then, you might ask when to use the innovation readiness tools. So essentially, expected users are government officials, in this case, and others that are involved in NQFs, RQFs, I guess even the ACQF on a broader level. And, just to improve, processes and development of these areas of innovation. So the use of the tool itself should be embedded in the innovation design process, whether or not the innovation is related to technology or not. And earlier we had touched on the innovation design cycle as well, as to what that entails. And then the tool can be used, when policy and embeds an innovation, when it's a significant element of a proposed government strategy to development or implementation of an innovation, right? And then how to use the innovation readiness tool, that's another important aspect. So the tool should be used when a specific innovation is proposed. So as soon as the solution to a problem involves some form of innovation, this is when the tool really becomes very relevant. So the tool does ask like some general questions about policy and infrastructure, but more so to be considered, is designed to be considered in reference to a specific proposed innovation. And like I said, it's a general assessment. So we might like to look at, the tool as part of a policy development process. So, countries are beginning to engage in policy development frameworks, which dictate how policy should be developed. And then obviously this involves a number of stages. Here we have, two examples This is from Kenya and South Africa. So in Kenya, the guidelines for public policy development and review is under the Institute for Public Policy Research and Analysis, from 2020. They outline 6 stages of policy development, right? So problem identification, agenda setting, policy design, approval, implementation, and lastly, M&E, right? Now, if you look at the South African example, this is from the National Policy Development Framework, so under the presidency in South Africa. It's also from 2020. 6 slightly different stages of policy development. First being problem diagnosis and option analysis, policy design, policy adoption, policy implementation, policy monitoring, and policy evaluation. So anyway, in this case, the monitoring and the evaluation are kind of separate as 2 different steps, as opposed to the Kenya example where this is 1 step in this case. And then obviously, we've kind of collated that into a diagram of, this example. And then, you can see like from the beginning is problem identification and diagnosis, option analysis and agenda setting, policy design, policy adoption, policy implementation, monitoring and evaluation. So this is the, the South African example represented in diagram form.
Can I ask a question about
Yes.
the diagram? Thanks very much. So the 2 examples, Kenya and South Africa, are very, very similar, which is perfectly normal. It's also, let's say, international knowledge. But I wonder, where is the place of policy review? Because normally this is a loop, isn't it? So it doesn't stop with evaluation. It goes also into review because it's always continuing. But maybe there is a different angle here.
I mean, from the steps that are outlined here, obviously they don't mention the review of policies, but generally we do know that with many policies, the review aspect of it would be written somewhere within like the broader, policy itself, that after a certain number of years or whatever the case might be, that review process would be a part of it. I mean, even when we talk about NQFs themselves, there is that, that space where they live in policy that, after a certain amount of time, there needs to be a review of this particular policy. So.
Also has asked questions in the chat box, Deodon, 2 questions. But yes, Deodon, vas-y.
Yes, it's an interesting stages. So the question I have is to know how long, in your own case in South Africa, how long did it take, and what are the different parameters that can affect this process, or what are the different parameters that affected the process when you people were doing it?
All right, Kelly, do you want to take that?
He's handing off these difficult questions to me. Thank you, Deodon. So it does depend on the type of policy. So for example, a review of a qualification, for example, can take up to 4 years because the research required at this stage is quite extensive and it's time consuming. And it doesn't leverage these processes of partial automation or labor market intelligence that we are now used to seeing in Tunisia and Estonia and elsewhere. So it can take quite a long time for a policy to be developed. And even in the case of South Africa, even when it's not something like that that requires extensive research, there's a requirement for consultation as well. So it is very rare for a policy to be developed in less than 2 years, you know, because the processes of consultation are quite extensive.
Okay.
All right. Was there another question, Eduarda?
I think it's fine. Yeah. Thank you. Mhm.
All right. Thank you. So, you know, from our tool, so what we propose is that, you know, the tool can be used, you know, as part of the second stage, which is, you know, the option analysis and agenda setting, in order to determine the feasibility of an innovation and inform further policy design. You know, and then obviously we think also that the tool can be useful as well in the policy evaluation aspect, you know, to assist in determining underlying factors which contribute to the success or failure of a particular policy in this case. So now looking at the tool as part of a strategy development process. So in addition to, official policy development, the tool can be used when, you know, a significant element of a government or even departmental strategy relates to development or implementation of, you know, an innovation. And in this case, the tool can form part of the development process, you know, just to gain insights on whether the required resources and supports are in place to implement whatever innovation have been might have been come up with, you know, at that particular point. You know, it can suggest or provide suggestions on risks and areas which need to be further considered before the implementation of such an innovation. And then, you know, actions to address these areas or mitigate the risks can then be incorporated into the strategy. So we think it is useful as well in that aspect. But obviously, like I said, you know, we are looking for your feedback as well into what you think of all of these things that we have, you know, put down on paper. And then who should be involved? So the tool asks questions on, you know, the policy environment, national infrastructure, the human resource capacity of government, business model of the innovation, you know, how it is funded, etc. And like I say, when we deal with new technologies or innovations, one thing that always comes up and should always come up is the issue of ethics, you know, related to such an innovation, such as access, transparency, security, and the benefits that, you know, it provides. You know, those are some of the things that should be at the forefront of thinking about innovations. So, so while future iterations of the tool, some of the necessary data could be drawn from sources such as, you know, publicly available data. The current version relies on, you know, self-reporting, as we've already mentioned before. But however, it may not be the case that, you know, one individual knows all the required information. Therefore, it is advised that the tool be completed based on consensus, you know, by a group, which includes the team responsible for development of the policy, representatives from senior government management within qualifications authorities and the relevant ministry, and some people from the NQF regulatory body. The individuals, you know, of the team which will primarily be responsible for the implementation of the innovation, and, you know, where possible, representatives from national state agency, because I think they would have a lot of information into a variety of aspects of national concern. So it may still be necessary for some research to be undertaken in order to accurately respond to some of the questions, but it's possible to skip some answers if the information is not known. So you're not obliged to just answer for the sake that the question has been asked. If there is no answer at that particular point, you can skip to the next question. And then how does the tool works would be one of the more crucial questions. In order to use the tool, the following must be in place. So a small group of individuals with the mandate to influence policy and familiarity with qualifications and credentials in the country is also a benefit that is useful in this case. A shared understanding of the proposed innovation and its planned implementation mechanisms, and access to the online tool by at least one member of the group. So just looking at time, say, some of the things here is just, just aspects of, the responses to the tool, are based on framework, the framework defined in the technical guideline 9. They do cover 5 areas: enabling policies and environment, infrastructure, human capacity, ethical and security, and financing. But I just want to take you to, the proposed questions, that are part of the tool itself. Like I said, this is divided into 2 sections. So section A just asks questions based on, innovation in general. And then if the innovation would be technology enabled, then section 2 actually covers that point. But if it doesn't involve technology, then only section A really applies. So there's different ways to answer these questions. So under section A, enabling policies and environment. So the response option to the questions that would follow would be not in place, in development, drafted, approved, currently, widely implemented. And those questions would be, has a national qualifications framework system been developed in the country? Does the country have an official policy on RPL, so which recognizes citizens, or which enables citizens to receive credit for life or work experiences? Does the country have policy and strategy on individual or flexible learning, right? And then the second set of questions under section A, the responses, are from a sliding scale of 0 to 100. What percentage of educational institutions in the country regularly report on qualifications data on time, according to government standards or expectations in this case, or whatever the case might be? And what percent, of students have a student ID number indicative that follows them throughout their educational career? Section B is around infrastructure. Response options are not in place, planned, but partially in place, currently in place. Does your country have a designated body to oversee the management of qualifications and credentials? Second set of questions would be no, somewhat, mostly, and completely. So you go through all these sections, around human capacity, and you get this indication of how to answer the questions. And, ethics and security is covered, financing, and then innovation type. So here, this is where, you answer the question, does the innovation require network technology? If the answer is no, the self-assessment is done for that particular innovation. But if it does require network technology, then section 2 would be relevant to you. And then you would answer questions around enabling policies and environment, technological innovations. Maybe let's just take one example to say, you know, for this first question, the response options would be not in place, in development, drafted, approved, currently widely implemented. What is the question? Is there a binding national policy document to support digitalization of government services in the country? Is there a binding national policy document which explicitly protects the privacy of an individual's data? And then likewise, you go through these questions, around infrastructure, human capacity, ethics and security. And like I said again, you will get an indication of how to answer the list of questions that would follow below. And this would be, you know, the end of what the tool itself covers. And like I said again, please feel free to give us feedback on the tool itself. And you can send all those maybe to Kelly. You'll find her email address in the document. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Patrick. Maybe participants have now a moment to ask questions or make any comments. Kelly, we have just 4 minutes, but it's also good for some comments.
Yes, Eduarda?
Oui, vas-y.
Yes, but interesting one. Thank you, Patrick, for the presentation. I'm seeing cybersecurity, and I think the notion of cybersecurity is very important in the safety or security of data. So I don't know if there are certain notions that are included in it, because here you are asking a question to know, are there protocols in place for cybersecurity within the department? Do they know what cybersecurity is before asking the question? I don't know. Because in all our various questions, maybe, I don't know if they knows it. I don't know if my question is clear.
Yeah.
Patrick?
Yes, sorry about that. Yeah, so, I mean, so remember that, you know, the tool itself, you know, is part of the module, and in the module, having gone through it, we do cover a lot of aspects around, you know, those topics. So I think at this point, once you get to, you know, to using the tool, having gone through the module, they should be equipped with the knowledge of what all these different terms mean, you know, what we mean by cybersecurity, what it involves, and, you know, what kind of, you know, steps might need to be taken, because, you know, there are already some countries that are already implementing some of these things. So just by the additional literature that comes with the training manual, I think they would have at least a basic understanding of, you know, some of these topics, like cybersecurity, for instance.
There is also a glossary in the training manual, but I think the question was very important. It raises immediately a concern, let's say, from the point of view of the beneficiaries, participants, or users. So that maybe some of these terms that are more recent, let's say, and maybe not yet sufficiently disseminated, could be somehow, there could be some hyperlink or so on the word cybersecurity, leading, for example, simply to the glossary, I don't know, or a footnote, just to help people. But yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a very good suggestion. We could definitely link some key terms either back to the glossary or to dictionary.com or to wherever. But I think the the other issue raised here by Diodon is, when we say things like, is there sufficient training for government staff? Does that, is it clear what sufficient means? And to be honest, although normally JET would not include terms like sufficient or enough or things like this in a survey of this type, the approach is basically that each country must decide for itself what is sufficient, what is enough, what are the protocols, and so on and so forth. So I think the question that I would then pose back is that is this reasonable, or in your opinion, the right approach? Or should we rather be firmer and say, this is what we consider sufficient training. Do you have this amount of training? And then on what basis would we be, if we choose to go that route, on what basis would we be determining that idea of sufficient training? So this was something that I also queried in my own mind as we were devising this. So I'd like to put that out there.
Okay. There is also a comment from Tunisia saying basically that the tool is very rich and comprehensive, and asking whether it will be available, the tool, not only the tool, but also the module, whether it will be available in French. And I replied, yes, all these training modules are being translated. So most are already translated into French. Oui, donc tous les modules de formation, les outils sont déjà traduits même.
All the tools are already translated. We're just doing the last checks, and they will be available very soon. All the modules in French and Portuguese.
Okay, so I think we are over time. I would just like to say that we will, of course, be collecting comments additionally through email, as Patrick mentioned several times, and my address is on the documents. And if you send it to me in French, I will quickly forward it on to Eduarda, and she will help us. So please don't hold back on account of language. If Google Translate cannot help me, we luckily have resources who can. Yes, and maybe I'll also, like Patrick, take some French lessons, see if I can't improve.
It would be a good way to assess.
Yeah, my French is very basic, unfortunately. I can ask for coffee.
Don't worry, I will not send comment in French.
No. I just wanted to say about cybersecurity, that now in relationship with this geopolitical crisis we are having in Europe, the governments in European countries are giving a specific, let's say, subsidies or support programs to all companies, SMEs, etc., so that they create and reinforce their cybersecurity. So government is helping the private sector reinforcing their cybersecurity.
Yeah, it's a major issue, I think, for all countries, with ransomware and these sorts of things happening. It's very difficult to be up to date and to have enough cybersecurity for particularly sensitive government information. So yeah. I think this is a serious topic.
So do you want to close the meeting, Kelly? Yeah.
Yes, I think we can pause here. We've gone a little bit over time. So thank you all for bearing with us and for listening to the training module. As I said, comments are still open, and we will very much look forward to receiving those. And Eduarda, just before we close, would you like to say a word or two about future opportunities to engage with ACQF?
Yes. Thank you so much, Kelly, Patrick, and all participants for this meeting. And I think it was a very good way to engage with these two tools. They are actually in one package, and to already share views and ask questions. So the next important opportunity to meet and to learn much more is then the training program from 18th to 22nd of April, very soon. And you are all registered, so we look forward to seeing you all. We will be sending updates very soon about all the materials, all the learning materials throughout the 10 themes. And then we meet then in a bit more than 2 weeks. 18th April is the first day. You will also receive some communication related to your registration in the Moodle platform. That will be very fundamental so that you get in the end the certificate, a digital certificate for participating in that training program. And just to say that in July, there will be another training program. Hopefully it will be hybrid. So the location, physical location is Nairobi, Kenya. So we hope to have the chance also to see you there. It's a very interesting country, very dynamic in terms of, for example, the NQF and qualifications development. So we meet you then there as well. Thank you very much. Wishes of a very good weekend. Peace to all of you. Merci beaucoup, mes chers amis de la Tunisie, du Cameroun.
Thank you to the friends from Tunisia and Cameroon. We'll be soon together physically, I hope. And it's always a pleasure to see you again with emotion.
So we can close the meeting. Thank you so much. Domo arigato. And thank you so much, Patrick. I have to introduce you my own Patrick, by the way, my son. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Alina, and all our interpreters. Timothy. À très bientôt, ma chère Olfa. À très bientôt.
See you soon, Alpha.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's make a picture if you want. If you close the screen sharing, Patrick, then we can make a picture. Everybody, thank you. Merci beaucoup, tous.
Thank you, Eduarda. It's always very appreciated. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Merci.
Bye.
Merci. Ma salama.
Bye. À bientôt.
See you soon.
Donc, on peut fermer la réunion. Merci beaucoup.
Now we can close. Thank you.
Many thanks, Alina, as
Thank
always.
you, Alina, for all your support.
Thank you, Kelly.
Bye.
Bye.
We'll see you on the 7th.
Yes, on the 7th. Thank you very much, Kelly.
Bye.
Goodbye. Have a good weekend.